Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second podcast of Millennium Quest. I'm your host for today, James, one of the writers and producers of the show. Unfortunately, Gareth, the second writer and producer, isn't here today, so fortunately you've got me instead. So in this podcast, for those of you who listened to our first Millennium Quest podcast, you'll know what this is about. For those of you who don't know, Millennium Quest is a new audio science fiction series based in the hopefully not too distant future. But in this podcast, we are actually going to be explaining about the story for the pilot episode, some new characters which have been written in. We're also going to be talking about the competition that we announced in the first podcast. Now, I'm going to start with that to get it off my mind. We put a competition in our first podcast to say we wanted people to design us a logo for Millennium Quest. Now, since the competition date officially ended on the 20th of January, we only had 2 or 3 emails come through with logos for Millennium Quest. Now, thank you to those people that did send them in. That's very much appreciated. But due to the fact we only have 2 or 3, we are actually going to be extending the competition date. Now, the competition date will now officially end on the 20th or 21st of March. No, sorry, correction. It will last until the end of March. So you have at least 2 months to get your designs done and to return them to us by the end of March. And it's like the closing date now will be, I think we'll put it the 25th of March. Yeah, 25th of March is now the official closing date for our competition. So if you do have a design, please do send us your logo in the description below. Myself and Gareth will go over the logo, over them, and determine which one we think is the best one to use for the show, and then we will contact the person who is the winner. We will not be able, I'm saying this now, be able to contact everyone who has sent us emails in. So I'm saying that now. So if you don't hear anything after the date, then you haven't won anything. But the winner of the competition will have their logo used as the permanent for Millennium Quest. We will also be placing that on a t-shirt, and also we will send the winner a free t-shirt with their logo on the t-shirt. So of course, just make sure we will email the winner, and we will ask them to give us their full name and their address. So, going now to the story. We have 3 new characters brought in. One being Chief Engineer Maxwell, who's going to be obviously the main engineer for the show, who is going to be in it more or less every episode. We have Admiral Nixon, who is going to be the person overall in charge of the Millennium Project. And we have Professor Gibson. Now, Professor Gibson is the man who is going to be in charge of the time equipment on Millennium, like the time machine and stuff like that. And he is going to be more of a nervous sort around people when he's not working. And he's going to be the sort of person that when he's walking down the corridor, he's too busy reading files or reading letters, and tends to bump into people quite a lot. In fact, we're going to have him bumping in quite a lot to Colonel Scott. Now, the pilot episode is going to be more or less based on our 2 main characters, Colonel Matthew Scott and Lieutenant Andy Richards, more or less meeting each other and figuring out what they're doing, and also having a tour around the ship Millennium. But of course, in this one, the ship is well overdue. It's taken too long to build, so obviously in this episode, near the end of the episode, we're going to have to try and get it finished quickly. We also do have the briefing, or at least a short briefing, for our second episode, or our first mission, which will of course take them back to Nazi-occupied Europe. Now, I'm not saying any more than that. Now, for those of you who did listen to the first podcast, that they are of course going back in time to different periods to try and chase down the Mars colony leaders from the Mars War, who of course escaped. So obviously that's where they're going first. But of course that'll either be our second episode or our third episode. Depends how long our pilot is. If our pilot episode is a long time, then obviously we're going to have to we'll have to make it our second episode or our third, depending on what it is. So myself and Gareth, we do have high hopes for this, and we are going to be putting casting calls out for our 3 characters. See, we want a male role for Engineer Maxwell. We would like a female role for Admiral Nixon, because obviously at the minute we all have all male roles. So we'd like a female role for Admiral Nixon, and of course we want a male role for Professor Gibson. So that's what we're going to be doing. If you are interested, please do send us an email with an audio clip of yourself to the email in the description below. We shall, of course, myself and Gareth, we shall listen to your audio, and we will inform all those who have emailed us, if we can, if you have or have not got the part. If you have got the part, we will be sending you a copy of the script, and also we may have to ask you to go online so we can try and record whilst you're online, so we can try and talk to you at the same time. So more or less, this is what the story is just going to be about, really. This is what this podcast is really about, just giving you some updates about what's been going on for the story. We've had to edit it, and due to technical difficulties, I was hoping that this podcast would have come out a few weeks ago and myself and Gareth would have started recording, but because of technical difficulties we've been pushed back. So at the moment, myself and Gareth, we are starting to record now, but hopefully in a couple of weeks our first episode should be aired. But of course it's going to take a while, because obviously we have the recording to do, then we've got the editing to do, and then we've got to try and stick all our sound effects and music over the top of it as well. One thing we will be doing is we are going to be using all sorts of music, from classical music to modern to horror music, and I'm going to say now in this podcast, for all of those who are listening, we are not going to be taking anything copyrighted, so we are not taking credit for any of the music we will use. So obviously, if you're listening to it and there's a piece of music in which you know from a television series, from another television series, or something else, then obviously we are not taking credit for that music. We will be putting information up in the description below. I think really we just want some music for it, because obviously it's a bit difficult to try and make your own music out of the blue, really. But anyway, that's the podcast for this one. I know again it's not too long, but more or less, as I say, it is just all updates, and hopefully in our next podcast we should have some more people together, and hopefully we can bring them into the podcast to try and introduce themselves. So thank you very, very much for listening, and as I said, if you're interested in the competition or the casting call, please do look in the description below, and please do follow the details and if we can, we will get back to you. If not, then good luck. Thank you very much for listening. Bye bye.